In this video, we'll be going over the September 2022 ban lists, going over all the changes and what their implications are on the meta. Starting out with the banned cards, we have Crystron Halqifibrax, going from limited to forbidden. This card is a Water Machine Link 2, which takes any 2 monsters including a tuner. It brings out a level 3 lower tuner straight from your deck when Link Summon, but its effects are negated on the field that turn. Also, during your opponent's main or battle phase, it can banish itself to tag out into a tuner synchro monster from your extra deck, and that is treated as a proper synchro summon. It's been a long time coming, but Halq has finally been put on the ban list. This card combines an extremely generic summon condition with a really powerful effect for extension. Its restrictions on the monster brought out didn't matter if you just brought out a monster with a graveyard effect, or even something you could use on your opponent's turn. This made Halq into a must include in any deck that ran tuners, as a way to keep playing as long as they had bodies out. Even slower decks such as Eldritch and Sky Strikers ran it though, as in simplified game states, you could normal summon a hand trap tuner and then use it to go into Selene and then Axis Code Talker to close out a game. Its second effect was quite relevant in artifact size setups, especially during the last format. Artifact Dagda can be used to set a size directly from your deck, which can be popped with Halqifibrax tagging out into Wonder Magician during your opponent's turn to summon Scythe and lock your opponent out of their extra deck for a turn. Either way, these are just the ways that Halq had been used recently, but this card had made a huge impact on the game ever since it came out. Many tuners got banned as soon as Halq got released, and many more would follow soon after. For a really long while, it seemed like a similar situation to Firewall Dragon, where Konami also banned every card surrounding it instead of hitting the actual problem card. At last, it's finally been forbidden, and will most likely never come back. There were a few things more broken in Yu-Gi-Oh! Than being able to summon monsters from the deck with little restrictions, which cards like Halq and Summon Sorceress before have shown us. Even if it wasn't as big of a problem as it once was because of Sprite and Tier Elements being the best decks right now, the metagame will still change quite a bit due to this not being usable anymore. Sprite often ran Halq because when comboed Swap Frog, you could use it to bounce hand traps that Halq would bring out from the deck. The Punk engine was sometimes seen alongside either deck, and much of those cards' strength was because of Halq. Many adventure decks from last format used Halq plus Dagda combos as their main win con to protect their adventure cards. However, this is just scratching the surface of all the reasons why Halq saw play, as there hasn't been a format since its release where it hasn't seen at least some play. Overall, it's good to see this card finally on the list, even if it didn't feel particularly broken at the moment. It's been a huge problem for the game from the get-go. Then we have Ronintoadin, going from unlimited to ban. This is a level 2 water aqua monster, which cannot be treated as a synchro material and whose name becomes Des Frog while on the field. Its actually relevant effect though, is that it can banish another frog monster from your graveyard to special summon itself, and this is not a once per turn. Ronintoadin was banned because it provided a really easy way for decks to go into Totally Awesome, which is a rank 2 Xyz which can negate and steal an opponent's card, with a floating effect that puts back any water monster from the graveyard back to your hand, but needs to be made with aqua monsters as its materials. Totally has been an incredibly powerful card, which was only somewhat balanced due to how it was kind of awkward to bring out most of the time. Many decks like Paleos, Prank Kids, and really anything that could make Bahamut Shark had played Toad in the past, but it finally became a huge issue with the new Sprite cards. Sprite Gigantic is a generic rank 2 which can summon out any level 2 monster from your deck, and Sprite Elf is a link 2 which can revive any level 2 as a quick effect from your graveyard, or even a rank or link 2 if your opponent controls a monster. The way this was usually used is that Gigantic would bring out Swap Frog from the deck, which sends Ronintoadin to the graveyard. Then Gigantic and Swap get linked off into Elf to bring back Swap Frog, and then its non-once per turn effect to send another frog to the graveyard to give you fodder to bring back Ronintoadin. Then Ronintoadin and Swap Frog on the field, you can go into Totally Awesome. During your opponent's turn, you could use Totally to negate and steal twice, because Elf could bring it back as long as your opponent puts a body on the field, all while Totally's graveyard effect gives you follow-up for the next turn. This engine was one of the main reasons why Sprite was so successful, but Tier Element decks also sometimes played a frog engine because of Tier Element's early. They're archetypal level 2, which it allows for easy access to Elf and even Totally Awesome itself because it's also an aqua monster. This hit drastically lowers the ceiling of Sprite, one of the current Tier 1 strategies, since most variants relied on how well Sprite Elf went with Totally Awesome to stop your opponent from playing. After that, we have Fairy Tale Snow, going from limited to forbidden. This is a level 4 light spellcaster which can banish 7 cards from your hand, field, or graveyard to special summon itself, and also it gets to flip the monster face down on summon. This card had actually been banned for quite some time before returning to the game a couple of formats ago to see how fine it was, but that was clearly not the case. When this card first hit the list, it was banned due to how good it was with Thunder Dragon decks, which would all trigger their effects when banished by this card. But by the time Snow was released from the ban list though, those decks had long left the meta due to the ban of their boss monster, Thunder Dragon Colossus. The not once per turn effect made this card extremely annoying to deal with, especially in combo decks that can manage to get enough fodder in the graveyard for it to activate its effect multiple times per turn. Snow can not only be used as interruption, but it can also be an extender by coming back to the field to be used as materials, and it can even allow you to play around targeted negation by banishing the monster in the field as cost for snow. For a while after coming off the list at the beginning of this year, this card saw play mostly in Adventure and Despia branded. For the Adventure decks, this card could be sent from the deck to the graveyard with Shooting Riser Dragon, which you can make with a level 4 Adventure token and any of the Rose Dragons. In Despia decks, Branded Fusion can use this card from the deck as material to make Albion the Branded Dragon. In the current meta, they saw play in pretty much all tier element variants. Their meal style gives them lots of ammo for snow, as well as a way to find it for free as they do the tier element combos. And if they don't mill it by chance, they can still go into Curious the Lightsworn Dominion to guarantee it hits the graveyard, which is even better than sending it through Shooting Riser, since it doesn't put any restrictions on snow that turn. The banning of this card hinders tier element decks the most, but the deck's playstyle doesn't really change with snow's ban, it just loses out on a really good card to mill as they do their turn. Then from Unlimited to Forbidden, we have Chaos Ruler the Chaotic Magical Dragon, a level 8 Dark Dragon Synchro monster. On this card's Synchro Summon, the card excavates the top 5 cards of your deck, and you can add one light or dark monster and then send the rest of them to the graveyard. It also has a graveyard effect where you can banish a lighted dark monster from your hand or graveyard to special summon itself back, but then it gets banished when it leaves the field. Chaos Ruler was one of, if not the strongest level 8 Synchro available in the game. It can be made with generic materials, and its effect would often let you at least +2 in card advantage. Dragon Link decks had this as a central part of their combo, as it was really easy to make with the rocket engine and let you excavate into either extenders or hand traps, while also being reusable body to use for the deck's strongest interruptions. Chaos Ruler together with Crystron Halqifibrax was the main reason why Punk engines ever saw any play, since they made resolving a single Noah Punk Zia Min into one of the highest amounts of card advantage you can get off of a single card, while also putting a negate on the board with Baron de Fleur. In the current meta, while Punk engines can be run on either of the top deck, it was mostly popular in tier element decks. This is in no small part because of Chaos Ruler, since its mill effect will also trigger the graveyard effects of all the tier elements you excavate on top of everything else. With this card leaving the format, Dragon Link becomes a tad bit worse, and Punk becomes almost entirely unusable outside of dedicated Punk strategies, at least at first glance. And the last card being forbidden is a counter trap, Red Reboot, going from limited to 0 copies. This card can be activated in response to your opponent activating a trap card, and it negates the trap card's activation and then sets it face down, while also allowing your opponent to set a trap directly from their deck. However, for the rest of this turn, after the card resolves, your opponent cannot activate any more trap cards. As a bonus, you can also activate this from your hand by paying half your life points. While not nearly as format warping as this card was when it was at 3, Red Reboot was still one of the sackiest 1-ofs you could draw into in a match. This card just completely shuts down back row decks when activated, with very little counterplay outside of drawing a Solemn Judgment due to it being a spell speed 3 hand trap. It saw play in tons of side decks throughout the years due to being the best 1-card answer to trap heavy decks, while also not being bad versus combo decks which use trap cards as interruptions. Red Reboot's downsides didn't matter because with no more interruption to deal with, it's very easy to clear your opponent's board anyways, or just straight up have lethal that turn. This card being banned has a small downside of leaving decks with even less counterplay to sided floodgates in games 2 and 3. But it does make life better for back row decks, which no longer have to gamble with your opponent having a single card which says I win the game post side. Now for the monsters going from forbidden to limited. First up, we have Blackwing Steam the Cloak. This is a level 3 tuner dark monster. It brings out a level 1 Aqua Wind token with 100 attack and defense whenever it leaves the field. It also has a graveyard effect where it can tribute a monster to special summon itself from the graveyard, but if summoned this way, it cannot be used as synchro material unless all other materials are Blackwing monsters. Also, it can only use the effect once per duel. The notable thing about this card is that its token generating effect is not once per turn, a hallmark of broken cards in the ban list, even if its revival is. This led to the card being preemptively banned shortly before Crystron Halqifibrax came out, since it gave you an easy way to search it straight from your deck. While this card's effect is still pretty strong in theory, there's no reason to keep on the ban list with Halqifibrax ban, since there's no longer a way to very easily search this from your deck. The other reason for this card to be unbanned is to help sell the new upcoming Blackwing support coming out in Darkwing Blast, the upcoming set for the TCG. While we still don't know how strong this card might be in Blackwing decks, since the OCG didn't have access to the new support at the same time as Steam, there's little reason to believe this card will have any impact on the meta at large at first. Then we have Mecha Phantom Beast O-Lion, a level 2 Wind Beast tuner monster. It cannot be sure of battle or card effects while you control a token, like most other Mecha Phantom Beasts. If it leaves the field, you can special summon a level 3 Wind Machine token, and it can banish itself from your graveyard to let you normal summon a Mecha Phantom Beast monster from your hand. Not unlike Steam the Cloak, this card was banned due to being a token generator, which works really well with Crystron Halqifibrax, since it's a tuner. Differently from that card though, this card was still allowed to coexist with Halq for a while, before being banned due to how broken their interactions were. What made this card overwhelmingly powerful in Halq decks was Mecha Beast Auroradon, a card which can search out O-line from the deck. It is easily made with Halq and another machine body. However, with both Halq and Auroradon on the ban list now, this card could easily come back with no issue. This card coming back probably won't affect the meta at all, unless Konami ever decides to bring Auroradon back into the game for whatever reason. Next up, there's also Cyberjar, a level 3 rock flip monster. When it's flipped face up, it destroys all monsters in the field and makes both players excavate 5 cards on top of their deck. All level 4 lower monsters are special summoned to the field in either attack position or face down defense position, and all the remaining cards are added to the hand. While once upon a time this card was a problem, flip monsters are way too slow to make any impact in the current metagame, even with an effect as overwhelmingly powerful as this one. Just like the other legacy unbans such as Yatagarasu, this card won't have any impact in the modern metagame at large. Then we have Substitoad, a level 1 water aqua monster. It protects all your frog monsters by battle and lets you tribute a monster to special summon a frog monster from your deck as many times as you want per turn. This card was banned over a decade ago due to being an FTK enabler when comboed together with the Ronintoadin. By emptying your deck of all of its frogs with Substitoad, you'd have enough fodder to special summon Ronintoadin from the graveyard enough times to kill your opponent in one turn by tributing with Mass Driver. Frog FTK was one of the strongest first turn kill decks in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, with a staringly high success rate. It could even play a really strong control game with Dupe Frog and Flip Frog in case the FTK didn't go through. Because of this, Substitoad was one of those cards that the player base thought would never leave the list without an errata to make it a hard once per turn, on the same level as other broken cards such as Magical Scientists. While it is scary to unhit a card which goes completely against modern card design like this, it probably cannot do much without Ronintoadin to give you the infinite bodies on board. It doesn't help that frog monsters outside of Swap Frog are completely unusable by today's standards either. And at last we have Spellbook of Judgment, a quick play spell card. Its effect is that during the end phase of the turn it resolves, it lets you add Spellbook spell cards from your deck to your hand up to the number of spell cards you activated that turn, and then lets you special summon a spellcaster monster from your deck whose level is equal to or lower than the amount of spells activated that turn. This card was originally banned to end the Dragon Rulers vs Spellbooks meta. Just to give you an idea of how broken full power rulers were, the only thing able to compete with them were Spellbooks with this card, which made you go +4 while summoning a floodgate from the deck. Nowadays, this card is still a strong card, but the rest of the Spellbook archetype has aged horribly in comparison with it. Though spell-heavy decks like Runic and Striker could play this card to get Joujin at the end of their turn, it probably won't amount to anything more than a gimmick. Finally, as the only card going from unlimited to limited, we have Appointer the Red Lotus. This is a normal trap card which makes you pay 2,000 life points and reveal your hand to look at your opponent's hand and banish one card from it until your opponent's next end phase. This card has seen play quite a few times as a side deck option for going first. It's pretty useful to back up a combo board by taking away your opponent's counters while also getting full hand information to know exactly what to negate. What this card has over something like Solemn Judgment or Anti-Spell Fragrance, as far as side options go, is they can remove board breakers which you wouldn't normally be able to interact with, such as the Winged Dragon Raw Sphere mode or Lava Golem. Even if this card is pretty strong and often gets compared to another ban hand rip card, Trap Dust Shoot, its limiting changes very little as you can just fill the other slots with the other myriad of turn skipping traps people play in their side decks anyway. Funny enough, if Trap Dust Shoot was at 3 copies and Appointer the Red Lotus was still at 3 copies, chances are players would actually choose to run Appointer the Red Lotus over Trap Dust Shoot, because Appointer can also hit spell and trap cards to get rid of things like Dark Ruler no more, to give just a little more indication on why it was limited, especially with decks using Nightmare Griffin to set it from the graveyard. As for cards going to 3, we have Dinomight Knight, the true Dracofighter. This card was considered the strongest of all of the smaller true Dracos for a really long time, and stayed on the list for several years because of that. With that said, True Draco hasn't been relevant as a deck since forever, due to losing both of their boss monsters and their best consistency card. This card was put to 2 last lists, and the deck of course still did nothing, so it's not going to do anything at 3 either. Then we have Cyber Angel Benten, a level 5 Light Fairy Ritual monster. The relevant thing about this card is that when it's tributed, you can fetch any Light Fairy from your deck. That makes this card an insane combo piece when coupled with Drytrons, which contribute rituals for cost to summon themselves. Benten lets them search more tribute fodder by getting other copies of itself, a starter with Diviner the Herald, or a boss monster with Vanity's Ruler. Though it is a bit scary to give Drytrons access to a card like this, the deck wasn't doing much with only 2 Bentens, so it probably will become meta relevant overnight with this. After that, we have Fusion Destiny. This card was semi-limited to make it so you'd have to run the same amount of bricks as Fusion Destinies in your deck in order to go into Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. Though people still ran the engine anyways for quite some time, this was because Verte let you leverage any 2 monsters in the field into a DPE. After Verte was banned, Fusion Destiny fell off the face of the earth due to how bad the live card to dead ratio was. Though going from 2 to 3 is quite a decent boost, we will have to wait and see how many people think it's now suddenly worth it to run DPE again. Nadir Servant originally got hit as a slap on the wrist for Invoked Dogmatica decks, as this is a +2 as long as you have a decent monster to send from your extra deck to the graveyard. That deck hasn't really been on the meta for a while now, but there's a chance this card could see way more play now that it's at 3, because of Garura Wings of Resonant Life. This new TCG exclusive card lets you draw a card when it's sent to the graveyard, making Nadir into what's essentially a Sky Striker Mobilize Engage with a Dogmatica engine, providing you a draw and a search. With that said, even if this is a really powerful play, it wasn't really seeing any play before. But with the other changes in the meta right now, it might come back to the forefront once again. Then we have Shooting Riser Dragon, going from limited straight to unlimited. This card had been limited for basically no reason in the last list. Absolutely no deck was running more than a single copy of it anyway. This card's utility is already greatly reduced due to Fairy Tale Snow being banned anyways, so odds are it will stop seeing play now that it's back at 3 and Crystron Halqifibrax is banned. Finally, we have Trickstar Light Stage. This is just a pretty good field spell, which is both an extender and an MST every turn at the same time. It went from 1 to 2 in the list last time and saw little play outside of being occasionally ran as a small engine in Sprite decks due to their archetypal level 2. So it's a pretty safe on limit, especially now that Sprite decks are way worse than before due to the other hits on the list. And last, we have Wall of Revealing Light. This normal trap was only still in the list due to a very gimmicky FTK when coupled together with Life Equalizer, since this card lets you pay almost all your life points at once. Even though it's usually better safe than sorry with FTKs, the setup is just too inconsistent and fragile for it to be of any concern, even with all pieces at 3. Alright, and that's the whole September 2022 ban list. While we still have to see how the meta develops, this seems like a huge hit to Sprite and a small hit to tier elements at first glance, while also freeing up some clutter from the list. If there's something we missed about any of the cards in this list, be sure to let us know down in the comments.